Hey guys, welcome. I'm Emily Gillespie, and you're here with me for this week's art chat. When I was in elementary school, my art teacher told me that I wasn't good at art. And so that would have been elementary school, so 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there. And kids at that age still think their teachers know everything. So I believed her. And for many years after that, I quit doing any kind of activities that I thought were artistic. It took me until the time when I was married with a young child at home to rediscover my artistic abilities and to learn that creativity is not measured by how well you can draw something. I realized how much joy I got out of making things, and I started creating, and I've never looked back. That was in 2012. Now I love to cheer on other women with encouragement and help them reconnect with the things that bring them creative joy. These art chats are a way for me to share my thoughts on subjects like self-care for creatives, the evolution of an artist's voice, and learning to be vulnerable in sharing your work and your gifts. I'm so glad you're joining me here today. This week I'm talking about artistic expression. There seem to be a lot of common misconceptions about artistic skill. First of all, people often believe that you were either born with artistic talent or you weren't. Making art should come quickly and easily. Second, that good art, in air quotes, is something that is an accurate depiction of the real thing. Third, an artist has to be good at all kinds of different artistic disciplines. At least, I used to believe those things. The truth is that none of those things are a good description of anyone's artistic abilities. Some people might be born with innate talent, but that talent still has to be developed. The most important thing is practicing the skill, whether you have the talent or not. Talent is actually kind of irrelevant, in my opinion. Nobody has the time or the inclination to put in the work to be good at everything. You might do well in a couple things, but to excel in everything is just not feasible. And lastly, art doesn't need to be realistic to be good. And that's the one that I want to focus on today. Art doesn't have to be a perfect representation of an object, a person, a scene, a still life, a landscape, whatever it is that you're making. Now, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And art, the purpose of art is often to convey a message or an emotion. So think of it as the difference between something that's functional, like drawing for drafting purposes, or engineering, architecture. That's something that you really want to be accurate and very technical. Compare that to like a painting or poetry, a beautiful home, a beautiful meal. That's something that was created to either express imagination in emotions, to reflect beauty, to bless others, and to share your gifts with the world in an expressive way. And this is actually something my dad and I always disagree on. And I can say this here because I've said this to him. It's not a secret. But he thinks that his paintings have to be technically perfect, that they shouldn't have mistakes. He uses traditional techniques and supplies and practices diligently all the time. He is very exact and precise. He does intensive workshops that really dive into accurate representations of subjects and the proper use of materials. He takes his art practice very seriously, and puts a lot of time into it. And I can appreciate that. His finished paintings are great, and I have several of them on display in my home. I think he doesn't give himself enough credit. He likes to disparage what he does, and he doesn't agree when I try to tell him otherwise. There's a lot of other artists besides him that work this way, but I'm not one of them. I've tried a lot of times, and it's not for me. I don't have the patience for it. I can't make myself sit still and focus. Being so focused and intent on one thing for long enough to get through a piece, I have a hard time with that. I don't have the mental discipline to keep working at something when I'm getting frustrated by it, when I'm mentally tired. I just get frustrated and shut down, and more often than not, those pieces, or attempts rather, get crumbled up and end up in the garbage. I don't have the patience to sit and try and render something just the right way and make refinements and adjustments. That's not me. My style of art is more expressive, and sometimes people get expressive mixed up with abstract, and that's not what I mean in this case. What I mean is just almost more impressionistic, somewhere in between, I guess, because that thought process holds true for whatever subject matter I'm working with. Whether I'm working on an abstract piece, a landscape, flowers, whatever else, I generally prefer to work quickly and intuitively with bold strokes and lots of messy drips and splashes. Thank you, Maureen. It's very sweet of you. Hi, Wendy. I'm glad you guys are here. So if I'm trying to do something like that, if I sit and think about it for too long, I freeze up, I get frustrated, I start to second guess everything that I'm doing, and of course I look at other people's work, and there's times when I wish I could do things like that, to have the willingness to sit and persevere at a painting, to really get all the details right and the highlights and values, and color mixing, or to really study something that I struggle with, like portraits, so I can improve and get better at it. But for now, I'm not really there. So I've collected some techniques over the years that help me be successful at working with my strengths, and with things that I'm comfortable with. So I wanted to share some of those with you today. So here's a few tips to help you be more expressive in your arts. This first one is really helpful for me, and that is to set a timer and don't overthink what you're doing. I usually like to just set my timer on my phone, or even a kitchen timer, just set it for 15 minutes and then just get started. Don't think about it, don't think too much, just keep going and don't stop. Some of my most interesting work was done by working intuitively for a short amount of time. Just follow your train of thought. Whatever feels right, whatever you think should happen next, do that. When the timer goes off, you're done, whether you feel like you're done or not. That's it, the end. Secondly, I have to remind myself a lot that your finished product doesn't have to be pretty. And by that, I mean, you know, you see a lot of art, like in the big box stores, that is, it's pretty. And it would go beautifully in your home, I'm sure, but it doesn't really have the expressiveness or the character or the feeling that you might want to have reflected in your home. So instead of aiming for pretty, think about things like, how does it make you feel when you're creating it as the artist? How does it make the viewer feel? And you know, whether that's you taking a step back from being the artist, how does it make you feel to look back at that? And for other people, if they're looking at it, you know, they don't necessarily know what your thought process was, and they don't necessarily need to either. But how does it make them feel? What kind of energy does it have? And you're right, Maureen. The things in the big box stores don't have energy. A lot of times, in my opinion, I feel like they're crafted just to be pretty, and not necessarily to have energy or passion or any kind of interest. And you know, anything you pick out from there, hundreds of other people are going to have too. So this is going off on a different tangent, but if you really want to have expressive art in your home, I would go for something original, you know, from a small artist, and not necessarily original. It can be a print, but something that was made with creative soul, out of someone's heart. That's what I would recommend. Yes, absolutely. Maureen says, the energy we put into our artwork holds and passes to the viewer. I 100% agree with that. You can feel it, can't you? I can feel it. And stuff from Target or Walmart or Home Goods isn't going to have that same spirit. So there's that. The next tip is to use your entire body, or to be conscious of which specific parts of your body you're utilizing. Think of it in this way. If you're just, if you're writing or playing in a coloring book, you know, you have your pencil and you're just writing with your wrist. You're moving your wrist, and that's the only movement there is. That is going to have a whole lot of different movement and energy than something that you used your whole arm for, your forearm or your arm, and that is going to have a whole different energy than if you're putting your whole body into it. You know, you've got a big canvas, and you're taking big brush strokes. That whether or not you're using a big brush or a small brush or in between, it doesn't matter. It's just going to have a whole different quality and character, and that will make a big difference to adding expressiveness to your art. My next tip is to explore different color palettes. Think about different color combinations you can use, different color palettes that you wouldn't expect for a particular subject. Like, you know, most of the time in art, people are usually painted using realistic flesh tones. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But if you wanted to get like really expressive or creative, or just do something off the wall, what if you decided to use greens for your flesh tones? I mean, as long as you have your values right, and you can depict the highlights and midtones and darks people are still going to be able to tell what it is, even if it's a funny color. My next tip is to incorporate words and marks or patterns or symbols, anything like that that is significant to you or to your story. So, like, for me, if you don't know, my son plays travel baseball. And so I've spent a lot of time at the baseball fields, and with my artist eye, it's just kind of natural for me to look around and pick out different patterns, things that are repeating, geometric shapes, that kind of thing. So in that instance, you know, like the pattern of the chain link fence at a ball field, you know, you could incorporate that into your work. You could draw it or use collage or an image transfer. If you are somewhere, here's another idea, like down in Florida, you know, we've got lots of palm trees, so you could incorporate the shape of the palms into your work. And even if those things get covered up by later layers, they'll still be there, and you'll know it even if the viewer doesn't, but they'll be there and they'll add to the texture and the character of your finished piece. Every layer builds upon one another and adds to the final thing. The sum is greater than all the parts, right? My last tip is to think about what feeling or message you're trying to convey. And how can you communicate that with different tools and materials and brushstrokes, colors or imagery. And then on the other hand, how could you use those things in unexpected ways to get the viewer's attention? So, like, for example, think of Picasso's Blue Period. You know, he was going through a really difficult time in his life, and he used blue to represent and symbolize that. And just think for a second about how those pieces would feel if they were painted with a different color, like red or gray or yellow. You know, like the composition would be the same, for example, but they'd have a totally different feel. Another example could be my Reverie collection. And here. So, like this piece, I don't know how well you guys can see it. By the way, this is called Looking for Poetry, and it's still available if you're interested. But take a look at this piece. I created all the pieces in this collection with a dreamy feel, with blues and yellows and whites to represent daydreams. You know, like you're looking up at the sky with the sunshine and the blue sky and clouds. And how different would these feel if I applied a filter to change the colors? You know, you can do that digitally, or even go on Instagram, just for an example. If you wanted to try out one of your own pieces, you know, they've got maybe 10 or 15 or 20 different filters on there, in Photoshop and other apps have even more. So just for fun, before I went on today, I took this piece and ran it through all the different filters, and it you know, you just saw the original, but the filters made it range from like very high values, high key, very light, to almost red, to orange, to blue. Hi Nan, how are you? I'm so glad to see you here. Um, so, think about that with your own work. And that's maybe an interesting study or a practice you could do to try and recreate some things you've done already in a completely different color palette. I think that would be really interesting. So those are just a couple tips. The possibilities, though, are really endless. And my main point that I wanted to emphasize today is that there's no wrong way to make art. Whether you are drawn more to technical work or expressive or abstract, whatever you're drawn to, whatever mediums or subjects you love, the colors you use, whatever brings you joy, those things are what makes your art good and right. Those things are what brings out your individual voice, and nobody else can replicate that. You really have a corner on your own voice, and that's valuable. And I say this all the time, but I really want you to embrace that and to share it with the world because it's important. People need to see it. So that's all I have for today. Make sure you're following me here on Instagram to get notified of future live videos, or join my mailing list to be the first to know about new art collections, behind the scenes, new blog posts, giveaways, more. You can go to emilyjaleski.com to sign up, and that's the same as my Instagram username here. So thank you so much for being here with me. I hope today's thoughts have given you some new ideas and some strategies to embrace your own creative style. I'll be back next week for you with a new episode. See you then.